How can you use NLP Anchoring to finally get the emotional freedom you wanted in your life and be able to change your state at will whenever you need to do something important, overcome procrastination, get rid of self-doubt, and become more confident in general? That is what we are going to uncover in this complete guide on NLP Anchoring. Basically, I noticed the older people get, the less they choose, the less decisions they make, and the more autopilot they become. Once you have a regular job, something that brings some distant income, people tend to just go on autopilot and never really change anything, or think that, oh, I don't like my life, but it is not that bad, so maybe just settle. And I think it is a sad thing. And NLP Anchoring and all the things about changing your own state within all the NLP trainings out there are very impressive tools to claim back the control over how you feel and what you thought was impossible, that you can actually engage into once and for all. So NLP Anchoring is a way of breaking that loop of just numbing yourself into distractions that are just leading nowhere, and start engaging into the actions that were scary, that you didn't think you could do, but actually you can, if you have the right resourceful state in place when you want to take action on the right things. For example, becoming more confident, becoming more courageous, overcoming all the moments where you endlessly doubt yourself and make all those inner dialogues about, I will never be able to do this because blah, blah, blah. All those things can just be wiped out in the blink of an eye with NLP Anchoring. Usually what is taught into classical trainings or books on the topic is just make a gesture, like anchor a resource with a gesture, like touching the fingers or something. And although this is part of it, I think those explanations are really missing the important point, which is what comes before you actually anchor a resource, all the selection process on which resource specifically, which one do you need, and how to make sure it will be something you can keep ongoing on the long term. This is the topic of this video. We are going to uncover all of that, so sit back and relax and take some notes if you want. First, we want to get back to something actionable right now, because usually people study too many things, especially with NLP. They study too many topics, too many books, too many authors, this and that, and then they are just overwhelmed and never really use any of the things they have been learning. Even less if it was a seminar. I mean, it is even more discouraging if it was a seminar, because you paid $500 or $2,000 and you're not even using what you have learned. It seemed very enthralling and really interesting when you have been listening to the speaker, but then you're not using what you know. I want this video to make a difference and allow you to start using all the things you know, but maybe didn't have the confidence or the courage yet to actually using. Therefore, we want to start with only one situation. I know there are many things in your life you may want to change. Maybe you don't have enough money, you want to lose weight, blah, blah, blah. Let's start with just one situation, one thing that is really painful, annoying, you hate that, or at least you would really want that to change once and for all. What is that thing? What is the situation? Does it have to relate to your relationship, to your, maybe your dog is pissing everywhere in your house? Not talking about him, but no, I just have my dog here. So you can just pick one situation that you want to change once and for all and start from there. In that situation that you can't change or you haven't been able to change yet, the thing you have been wanting to change, and every time you have attempted to, something seemed to have been crossing your way, you haven't been able to complete it, to accomplish it finally. It is usually because there is a kind of negative state, either because you were doubting yourself or you were not confident enough to actually say out loud the right things, or maybe you were not just courageous. You wanted to do something, but you didn't have the courage, the balls to actually do it. Or maybe you were just feeling bored, lazy. Could happen too. Laziness, just, oh, I will just settle here, like it's not that bad. What is the main negative state you are experiencing in that one situation that is really bothering you right now? What is the one state you are experiencing? How would you call that state? If you just had to give it a name, a basic name, is it disillusionment? Is it stagnation, fear, Procrastination, anger, maybe you are so upset that you just swallow all your anger at those people you don't like, but instead of communicating with them, you just swallow your anger. In that case, okay, upset, angry, frustrated, that might be the state that is really blocking you. What is basically the one state? We want to start with one thing simple, so one situation, general to specific, one state. What is the one state that is really keeping you stuck? Are you anxious? Are you angry, upset, guilty, procrastinating? What is the one state like that? Then the next question to prepare all this anchoring scenario, situation is, was there ever a time where you have been able to overcome that state? If the state that is really bothering you is stagnation, I want to, but I prevent myself from doing because it's not that bad, I'm like finding excuses, I'm giving myself a tap on the back, saying it is, I still did some good things, but deep down inside yourself, you know you're just bullshitting yourself and you would like to actually complete this one project that is important, for example. What is a situation where you have you have experienced something similar and you have been able to overcome it? Either there was a situation like that in your life, at some point you have been able to overcome your limitations, or if it never happened, then who is one person you know, either directly or maybe you have seen that person on TV or whatever, who is one person you know who would be able to deal with that kind of negative, compromising state very easily? One person, think about him or her, one person who has either the courage, the competence, the whatever, one person who, if that person was at your place, that person would be able to crush that thing very fast, very easily. Who is that person? And therefore, how would you call the state in which that person is into? If it was not you, because you have never overcome that problem, then what would someone who is able to overcome that problem would feel inside? In which kind of internal state would they be into at the moment where they finally overcome that problem? Is it about courage? Is it about fiercely going after what you want? What kind of set of words will you use to describe the state that person is into when he or she is actually crushing that goal once and for all? So that those things are the ground, really the foundation. Now, once we have this, we want to actually define, build up the encore. And the encore can be a movement, but it's not necessarily this touching. Well, everything around you right now may be an encore. If you are a writer, for example, Stephen King, the author of all those horror books, he used to always sit at his desk every day, I think at 5 p.m. or something. He was always sitting at his desk even when he had zero ideas. Why? Because it was getting him into a productive habit, and he was able to keep writing even when no ideas were planned, but just the fact of being seated here and starting writing was allowing his brain to fire off all the ideas, because it became an encore itself. The situation and the setup itself became an encore. So an encore can be anything. It can be it can be something you drink, it can be something you watch, it can be a movie, it can be a song, it can be the voice of somebody you like, it can be anything. What we want is incorporate the best modalities for you. So there are basically 3 modalities, or 5, the VAKOG, so visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. I never really use the last 2 personally. I don't really find many uses for those ones, unless you are a professional cook eventually. Otherwise, not really for me. So visual, auditory, kinesthetics, biggest ones. Which one is the easiest for you to encore? Based on the situation you will have to face adversity into, what is the most likely encore you can use? Will it be a gesture? Will it be something you will say to yourself, or a song maybe you can have on your phone and you listen to that song, so auditory encore? Or maybe a movie you want to watch just before, in that case the same thing, more visual, a bit auditory if it is the voices of the actors eventually, or kinesthetic, the breathing. Kinesthetic shifts, I think, are mostly about breath. How do you breathe? Or maybe you do some funny gestures in your bedroom to warm up just before some important meeting or whatever. What is the kind of encore that is the easiest to use in your situation? The best, obviously, is if you can stack up all the modalities together. So something visual mixed with something you listen to, mixed with something, some gesture or some some breathing you are going to do, couple deep breath just before going to something important, for example. What is an assembly of all the modalities together that can form a strong built-up anchor that will incorporate all the things together so that all those smaller micro anchors are reinforcing each other. You have the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, all of them are kind of reinforcing each other, and then when you will just want to fire up that resource, it will be way easier. How to define, how to fire up the resource initially? When I made you go through this selection process of who is somebody who might overcome that, or yourself when you have been overcoming that negative state, if you have someday been able to overcome that, what were you feeling, seeing, and listening to or hearing? If it is something you have witnessed, if the resourceful state you would like to be into is something you have never experienced yourself, but you have somebody in mind when you think about it who can go through this kind of resourceful, empowered state, what does that person look like? How do they speak? What is their voice tonality and how do they breathe? Maybe just witnessing that in the back of your mind can be enough to form the anchor itself. Just witnessing in your head the person who is able to overcome all of those things. Maybe it will be enough. If it is not somebody, if it was you, you can guide yourself through some self-hypnotic process, talking to yourself exactly as if you were guiding somebody else. If you were trying to hypnotize somebody and you are guiding that person's mind into some empowering, resourceful experience, then you guide yourself with the same kind of language. You guide yourself by closing your eyes. You guide yourself back to the point where you have experienced that resource. And as you are into that resource, then you can use a gesture, you can notice what do you hear, and you can notice what were you seeing, and then you can just play with that. If the visual is stronger for you, then you can paint a vision board and put it in your room somewhere so that you will be reminded of that every day. If the auditory is more triggering, more things for you, you might select a set of songs or a set of affirmations that will help you to trigger that state. And if the kinesthetic is stronger for you, like if you are like, I don't really see anything and the sounds, yeah, that's kind of blurry, but if you have a very strong elevation in your chest, okay, then the kinesthetic is for you and you want to double down on that one and maybe do the kind of breathing patterns. Remember the kind of breathing patterns that allow you to trigger that resource and have a kind of imprint for what does it feel like to be in that state. That is for the setup, the general setup of the anchor. So as you have seen here, it is kind of more elaborated than in many basic descriptions of anchoring, which is, oh, think about the good state and touch your fingers. Then when you will touch again, you will feel the good state. I would say yes, if the state is really strong, but the problem is if you are not with a coach, if you are not with a therapist, it can be kind of difficult to trigger a very incredible, impressive state by yourself, because not every day is the same. Some days you're just not into it. So I would say this one is more difficult by yourself, whereas having a compilation of all the resources together, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, all at once, it just makes it easier. And now we're going to see how to develop that and make it a habit, and habits compound over time, instead of having to always trigger massive willpower, because everybody knows that some days you will just not have willpower, some days you will just not be in state, in the most refreshed mind state, whatever, to actually get into something difficult to do with yourself. You will just not have that every day during the whole year. So to prevent that problem and make this anchor a habit, what I recommend initially is to make that a 7 days ritual every morning for 7 days. 7 days. I know people don't like long-term things because they think they will procrastinate. 7 days is not going to kill your life, please. You can have enough motivation for 7 days, please, for just 10 minutes per day for 7 days. So every morning for 7 days, you are going, once you have this clever idea, you have this kind of chain of anchors, you know what your anchors are and what you need to do to get through into the state. You are going to produce that every morning or every evening, whatever, once per day for 7 days. What is very important is when you will be in state. Once you will be into the right state, even if it is not as intense as the day you have felt it in the beginning 10 years ago, it doesn't need to be as intense as the day you have won the championship or whatever. But whenever you start to get the sensation, then you can reinforce the encore. And what is extremely important, and really pay attention here, it is to, once you are into that state, that resourceful positive state, then that's where you think about this future situation that used to bother you, or future, or like if it is happening in the present time. But that situation, when we got back in the beginning of the video, you know, the situation that really keeps you stuck, only think about this situation when you are in the right state, because your perception of the future and your perception, your reframing, because it is the mind is constantly reframing the past, the future, and everything that's happening around you every day of your life. Your mind is always reinterpreting things based on the state you are into at this current moment. If you are in a shitty state, you will just presuppose that everything that is going to happen in the next 10 years of your life is going to be shit. If you are in a very incredible, elevated, positive state, all the things you are going to imagine from your future, you will just find all the solutions. Or maybe you will just lower the level. Because in that positive state, something that happened for me was when I was triggering that positive state just before imagining my future, I was noticing that back in the day, I was putting the bar way too high, like 1,000,000 times too high. Therefore, in a positive state, my brain, without me directing it, my brain was naturally reframing to step down to this right here. That's the thing to aim for right now. Once you are there, okay, we can scale. First, you just think about this. And many people either set way too high, or they are so scared and so anxious that they just don't want to set anything. They just want to stay where they are and not change. Deep down, they are fucked up and they are really depressed, but no change anything. When you are in a very positive state, a very motivated or like rejuvenating, resourceful state, all this metrics, all this recalibration will be done by itself. You won't need to read many books to be clever. Your brain has all the capacities by itself. Your brain has all the resources. However, Encore is one missing piece, I think, that we are not taught as children, or maybe we know how to do it in the beginning and then we lose that skill, I guess, somewhere down the road. But when you fire off a good positive state, then your brain will make so many more calculations for what do you need to do and prepare your mind for all the right things, the right behaviors, conditioning yourself to react in the right way with the people that used to be annoying you or whatever, and you will just have a simpler life that way. In the same way, if you have any kind of insecurities, maybe self-doubt, or you have this stagnating feeling that you think it's just never going to end. Same thing. Those moments, just remember one of those moments where you had self-doubt or like, I don't really think I can do that, it's way too difficult, I'm not that smart. Those moments, same thing. Think about those moments once you have fired off the Encore, and you will notice your perception of those moments is completely changing. Even without hiring a coach, even without hiring a therapist, just by yourself, you can really change yourself in the right way by firing off the good resource. And once into that resource with Anchoring, you are in the right state. Think about all the moments where you doubt your skills, you doubt yourself, you criticize yourself, you think you're not good enough. Think about all those negative things about yourself once you are in a good state, in a positive, motivating state, or the state you have seen somebody who is more advanced going into, and you have encored that resource, for example. Once in that state, you think about all those excuses, all those procrastinating moments, all those insecurities about not being good enough, and you will have many reframings happening in the back of your mind without forcing them. They will just happen naturally because you kind of encore collapse. You are confronting a positive resource, what you have triggered, and a negative state or negative resource. And when the two collapse together with the intention in the back of your mind of I want to help myself, those things will just melt They will just mix by themselves automatically. You won't have to find consciously the best reframing ever for your excuses. They will just get reframed by the back of your mind naturally. Eventually, at the end, what you can also do is create a whole chain of encores. So one encore you have can already be a chain by itself if it was mixed between a visual trigger, an auditory trigger, and a kinesthetic one. It can already be like a micro chain, but this is like one big encore for one positive state. What you can do is having then another second state, maybe even more positive or even more resourceful, and then a third one. And every morning, same thing, you can just have the first one, which would be the easiest one to trigger for yourself. Some states might be difficult to invoke, but some states might be easier for you. What you can do then is every morning you start by firing off the easiest resource you have. So you get from a kind of bored, not really enthusiast state to a kind of curious state. Curiosity about life might be your first initial state to get out of bed. Then you might get into like motivation and courage, because there's going to be challenges today, how to overcome them, courage, motivation, and you might fire off something even higher, like listening to very empowering songs and watching some empowering movies. And when you watch those movies, you encore it somehow, maybe with your fingers or whatever. And this is like the higher up resource, like the above the edge resource. And every morning you go from the 1 to the 2nd to the 3rd, 4th, and you just build up your potential to react to challenging situations every day, even without thinking about it. So the more you fire up those resources every day, the easier it will be for your mind to keep firing them off like a habit, like smoking. Like, just imagine how cool could it be if the same way a smoker is compelled to smoke and it's completely automatic, instead of that you had a compulsion to feel good. How funny could that be? I think we should even try that with some clients just to see what comes out of it. Like, how can you feel above feeling good? Like, what's deeper, what's higher than this? I think there are many ways to play with those resources, and the only thing that can really limit you is your imagination. I think in the end you can just improve in many more ways you think, because imagination is not as limited as people think it is. Just nurture yourself with the right books, the right movies, the right speeches, whatever. Get new ideas, because this anchoring technology, you can use it in 1,000 different ways. What I have shown here is, I call this a complete guide, but it is like maybe like 1% of what we can do with anchoring. So the more you attempt new things, do new things, try new things, and the more you will spot one incredible solution nobody thought about before, and you will be the first one to actually find that. If you have enjoyed that, you can subscribe. I will be glad that you follow me more thoroughly by now and become more serious about your goals, and I will see you in the next video.